When we see 10 adults with depression, usually in their 30s or 40s, if you ask them when was your first depressive episode, at least 80% would say it was even before 18 years of age. 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds whose parents come to us, sir, is seeing TV till 3 o'clock in the night. YouTube, reel. Pointless scrolling. Naturally, when the biological rhythm gets disturbed, the brain gets dysfunction.
When a child is prone to have a seizure, like in a school, there are so many kids. So it can happen to anybody, anytime. Somebody says, put some iron rod in the hand, that can stop the seizure. Somebody says, put an onion in the mouth. That is the most dangerous thing.
When a child sees the screen, it's so engaging, the bright colors and all that, quickly changing scenarios, the sounds that they put in the screen, so engaging. He loses interest with the environment basically.
So we have a screening cutoffs. Roughly around 3 months there should be a neck holding. 5 to 6 months child will start sitting, and 7 months child will have this stranger's anxiety. Around 1 year he should start walking or standing without support.
Hello everyone, welcome to our podcast for Doctor Diaries. In today's episode, we will be having Dr. Ajay and Dr. Purnima. They will be talking about the child's behavioral issues and their developmental delays. Dr. Ajay is a gold medalist and has been practicing for almost 12 years. And on other hand, we have Dr. Purnima. She is a child neurologist. She did her fellowship in pediatric neurology from prestigious D.Y. Patil Medical College, Pune. They have been practicing child psychology and neurology for almost a decade now. In this episode, we had discussed some serious conditions like seizures, developmental delays, learning difficulties in children, child stroke, and epilepsy. We are going to answer all these questions in this podcast and try to help you understand when and where to seek help for your child.
Thank you so much for both of you joining us.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, normally parents or normal people get confused about the neurological and psychological problems. So how do you define it? What is the thin line between it?
I think it's a very, very important question. I think what we need to understand is for the brain, the neurological functioning and the psychological functioning, they are not two different concepts.
Okay.
They are not two different unitary concepts. They go hand in hand. Yes, I do understand that there are specific neurological conditions that madam deals with, and there are specific psychological conditions that I deal with. So when it comes to me as a child psychiatrist, we need to understand that behavior as such is a result of, one, the brain functioning, two, the temperament of the child, that is a psychological aspect of a child, and three, the social environment surrounding the child. Okay, so when the child comes to me, I evaluate this child all the three environments. I evaluate the child's brain. I evaluate what is the temperament of the child. Is he a easygoing child? Is he a very stubborn child? What sort of temperament styles does he have? How is his mood throughout the day and all that? And also, how is the environment of the child? How is the parenting of the child? How is the home environment where the child is there? So when it comes to this behavior specialty of mine, we see lot of different issues. It ranges from very commonly finding anxiety conditions like we have lot of separation anxieties, lot of specific phobias. Okay, then we have lot of defiant behaviors. Then you have a lot of very very popular conditions that are nowadays in form of depression.
Yeah.
Depression in children. And then we see a lot of manic episodes. Bipolar also has an onset very early. Okay, and then we see a lot of psychosis as well. So these are the behavioral domains or the behavioral conditions or psychological conditions that I as a specialist usually deal with.
Okay. And from the neurological perspective, ma'am,
Child neurology mainly deals with the system, like the brain, structural malformations of the brain, or there is any pathology from the brain, like development of the brain, or the spinal cord, or the nerves, peripheral nerves, or the muscles. Any of these cadres getting affected in the child neurologist mainly deals with. So the complaint, most common complaint what we everyday basis we'll see is epilepsy. seizures and which are fever provoked, unprovoked, or the head trauma, head injury, or there is a regression, or there is a developmental delay, headaches, there is a stroke, or neurogenetic and neurometabolic issues. So all this mostly pediatric neurology works like a puzzle when it comes to the diagnosis part. One eye finding, one other system finding, one in the brain, one part will be a neurological delay. Then it nerves connects every part of the brain. So some other body parts also will get affected, which will give us actually were a puzzle to solve such cases when they were treated at the right time in the right place at the early age. So the response and the treatment can go in a good way.
So now, like, you are working together. So what kind of cases do you see together you can solve it? Like, there is a need of a child psychiatrist and a child neurologist as well.
So recently in our clinic, this is a true case scenario. Recently in our clinic, we saw 11-year-old child. We saw a 11-year-old child. Okay, so this child has been having epilepsy since 2 years of age actually. Okay, so they came to us, me actually. They came to me for behavioral issues.
Okay.
Because the mother came to with a lot of concern. So the mother's main concern was, yes, the child was having seizures, but the child was being very aggressive, very irritable, not sleeping in the nights, very touchy, and he was being very hyperactive. Okay, to the extent that the child's academics got affected. He was expelled out of school because he was hitting his peers. He was not staying at one place. So these are the behavioral issues with which the mother has come to.
Okay.
Now, as any doctor should or would do, we go into a detailed history. How did this conditions, when did this condition start? How did it progress? And what was happening with the child? One thing that we noticed was that the child was, having seizures on and off.
Okay.
Initially in a different format, I think madam will say. And then, sort of after that, there was an academic decline. And in the same time, there was this behavioral issues that popped up.
Okay.
So because Dr. Purnima was there with me, so what we initially did is, like any psychiatrist would do, I think we need to focus on improving the functioning of the neurological aspects first.
Okay.
So it is very important for the audience to understand that, when you take the brain as such, when you look inside the brain, there are a lot of circuits. So any neurological disease affecting these circuits will cause certain disturbances in the brain.
Okay.
And when these disturbances happen, you will get behavioral symptoms.
Okay.
Okay. So when as a psychiatrist, I feel that the neurological cause is the reason for the psychological presentation, then I think those things should be treated first.
Okay.
However, in this case, this child both had was a complex case in the sense he had both the neurological as well as psychological aspects. So the interesting part about this case was there were multiple reasons that we thought when we discussed was the reason for the behavioral symptoms. One was the epilepsy, I think, with which madam would elaborate in further detail. Another was a medication. Third was also the social factors.
Yeah.
So the social factors I would like to discuss first, in the sense that this child was a preteen child, 11, 12 years, okay, raised by a single mother. The father was living far away in Dubai and all that. And this child, the mother, because she was not able to give enough time to the child, the child was having a lot of screen time. The child was having a lot of, processed food. And then the child was not being disciplined adequately. And, the father, even there was a differential parenting, the father from very far away was all the time pampering the child. The mother was trying to discipline the child. So because of all these various factors combined, the behavioral factors increase tenfold actually. Okay. So I think neurological aspect, I think madam will talk about that.
So this child basically she had a fever provoked seizures. So to begin with, there were many clustering of seizures in the beginning. Now this child also tend to develop it unprovoked seizures also.
Okay.
So which were not without any fever, what do you call it initially as a febrile seizure.
Yes.
Now they're turned into a normal seizures without any provocation. There is no fever. As age develops, febrile seizures usually tend to go down. By 5 years, we say the age maturity, that is like a benign condition which will go off after attaining certain age. Here, in some particular conditions, they will persist and take a different form.
Okay.
Along with this form, they can also have behavioral issues like ADHDs, hyperactivities, cognitive issues, speech issues. They later on they will develop and they will progress in that direction. And sometimes some very rarely regression also, but it is the mainly the symptomatology goes like this. So in this child, it can be either the epilepsy worsening, which any epilepsy increased amount of seizures worsening the behavior because it is hindering the cognition. That is again explaining the cognitive delays. That means the cognitive stagnation or whatever the mother addressing the school performance also went down. Or that is the already with the existing pathology, some certain that will affect like a multifactorial, like one gene mutation, one kind of disease will affect seizures also, will affect development also, will cause behavioral issues also. This is the different phases of that particular disease itself. So that could also be a problem, or it can be the whatever drug the child is taking. That sometimes some kind of medications they will tend to help. Also, they can increase the behavioral issues because we have to address these seizures first. We add such medication. Sometimes, in some cases, children they can increase the behavioral issues before knowing that is because of the drug. We would like to again see how is the brain functioning correctly. We would like to see the imaging, neuroimaging, MRI. You would like to see the electroencephalograph. That is the EEG. So we would like to see the seizure load, burden. How is the spike load currently? So when there is a seizure or abnormal activity, it can be picked up in the EEG as a different waveform, where we see a different amplitude waveform. Brain has a different stages of sleep and wakefulness, different kind of waves like alpha, delta, theta, that range. So we have a normal patterns, we have an abnormal patterns. That is how we pick up is the child brain without showing out, it can still seize inside. Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of. There is an electrical firing, misfiring happening. So that will hinder the normal development as a whole. So that is where we both have to collaborate and work. If there is no, if we made it clear there is no seizure, currently this child didn't had any abnormal electrical activity per se. More of that kind of presentation can as well initially like a fever, provoked seizures, then unprovoked, then behavior. Also can coexist. This is that kind of child you're dealing with. And parents always have the expectations that their child should do better. She was good at school in the initial years. Now she is not able to. Maybe her mental age, whatever she attained, has she has reached her mental performance, her maximum ability. Now with the load also, it can go down. Or that is her capacity because of the cognitive stage. She might study that much, but she can do good in other domains like swimming, cycling, any other domain. So we also have to encourage the parents to understand the condition and also encourage them to encourage the child in what they like. She likes dancing, encouraging that. She likes swimming. So don't just stick to only studies. It is always multi-directional development is as well. So parents also should understand they can't stress the child. That will decrease more their abilities.
So, like as Sir mentioned about the screen time, and I think most of the parents wants a solution. So we have discussed earlier, but I wanted to know from your perspective as a neurologist, like what do you suggest? How it is impacting our brain, and how we can rid of it?
So coming to the neurology perspective and the screen time. Definitely in less than 1 year, it should be a zero screen time as said by multiple bodies and the studies. The screen time should be zero. Like 6 months, 3 months, but that bright lights can trigger their development. Then they attract more. Their thinking ability, that abstract thinking, such whatever the thinking domains it should develop in, will get hindered. The imaginations, everything will get hindered because they are finding more attractive thing, more stimulation in the TV, so they don't want to go and perceive their own what gives them the joy. They can't pursue other stimulations. Like this makes me happy. I can play with this water. I can see the splash of water. I can throw the coins and see how it is. I can throw the food and see how it falls. These are all also a milestone in that particular age. Like a 3 months, 5 months, 6 months child, you make him sit in a high chair and you try to feed him. Then that child, what that child do? He tries to take the food on its own, but he won't put it in the mouth. He throws it. He likes to see the things falling. That is also a milestone. But you keep the some TV, some like a mother is the or somebody, whoever is the caretaker, is giving TV or the screen. Then that child will watch whatever happened. Then fast changing things, colors, everything on his eyes. He's so occupied, so he won't focus on what he is eating, how much his parent is happy that child is eating. Yes, whatever I give, she is eating and putting on weight. But that in a way, then you don't give the screen. You take away screen one time, they will throw bad and then you again give the screen. So that cycle will go on. Their creativity slowly will get hindered, and the tantrums and behavioral issues will increase. So early age screen time completely it should be stopped. And after around 1 year, it should no screen time. And after 1 to 2 years, it should be a timed screen time with supervised family together. And the content what they are watching should not give the phone to the child asking to scroll whatever you want. Just eat my food. No. We should put a content, we should time it that 20 minutes, 10 minutes, and just show what you want to show. And you have to be in a position that you can explain what is happening there. And child should find you are talking more interesting than the screen. That way you can give screen time, but only to a limited extent. It is an interactive thing.
I think just adding on what Dr. Purnima wanted to say. I think this is one common question that even many parents ask me, or I ask parents when they bring their child for a behavioral assessment or a developmental delay related assessment. I think we discussed this in the previous podcast. I think nowadays, I'm not very sure, but I think it's very difficult to say that, to the parents that don't give your child force. I think because it's very difficult. It's practically impossible. You have working parents, work from home. Another person is working somewhere else, and then the child is sort of seeing the screen in peace, and then the mother is able to work in peace, and then she feeds him, and then when he see on the screen, the feeding time per se reduces to 10 minutes or 15 minutes, which she can afford, right? Imagine running behind the child in a balcony or all along the room, feeding him for 45 minutes. So physically taxing for the mother, so emotionally draining out, and then she has to again work. Very difficult. So I think more important is per se, like what madam said, is supervised screen time, limited screen time, okay, is very, very important. Okay. Yeah. Usually when what we see in our clinics is a similar history where the parent brings the child, and on history taking, they say there has been unsupervised screen time, unlimited screen time for the last 1 year or so.
Yeah.
And like what madam says is absolutely true. When a child sees the screen, it's so engaging for him. There is so much of dopamine rush inside his brain. We should understand, we should think from a child's perspective. We as adults, we can always think what is right, what is wrong. The brain has developed to a certain extent. The prefrontal cortex that we called has developed to a certain extent where we say we're able to distinguish between this is right, this is wrong. I should not do this, I can do this. The child doesn't know that.
Yeah.
You give the child chocolate once, I want chocolate. I want chocolate.
Yeah.
I want chocolate. You give the child sweet once, I want sweets. I want sweets. Similar is the screen time. It's so engaging, the bright colors and all that, quickly changing scenarios, the sounds that they put in the screen, so engaging. He loses interest with the environment basically.
Yeah.
And this is what the systematic reviews and the meta-analysis say. What they actually say is that screen time even though it directly impacts the brain, it also indirectly impacts the brain in a way where what we have usually seen the psychological profile of the children who are watching lot of screens is that one, their sleep routines are disturbed.
Yeah.
Sleep very late in the night, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, wake up very late in the morning. Not just children, even adolescents.
Yes.
Right? How many cases we don't see in our clinics?
Yeah.
We see 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds whose parents come to us, sir, you see TV till 3 o'clock in the night. What is he doing? YouTube, reel.
Yeah.
Pointless scrolling. And he sleeps at 3 o'clock. So these children, their biological rhythms get disturbed. Naturally, when the biological rhythm gets disturbed, the brain gets dysfunction. What this systematic reviews and the meta-analysis say is these children who see lot of screen, they don't have any physical activity.
And I think not even children's. If children's are sitting with adults also, the grandparents or the parents, they are also watching continuously. They are not even, blinking their eyes. So it is so much interactive, the sound and the lights.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And another important thing is what we also found is most of these children who are addicted to increased screen time,
Yeah.
you see the profile of these children, 80% will be obese.
Yeah.
80% will be obese. The child absolutely sitting on the couch all day long. They'll be eating a lot of processed food. Nowadays with all the apps, processed food is just a click away. 10 minutes you order, it will come right into the hands. So the child doesn't even have to work to make food also.
Yeah.
So screen time, the important points that we want to highlight is it is not only directly impacting the child's brain, it is indirectly also impacting the child's brain. That's very important that we tell the audience.
So is it related to the developmental delays or regression also?
First, we would like to evaluate their routine, the other milestones. How are the other domains? So, development goes in 5 domains. One is motor, cognition, speech and language, and behavior. So, in all the domains, hearing also. So, in all the domains, we would like to assess is it appropriate to the age. So, we have a screening cutoff. Roughly around 3 months, there should be a neck holding. 5 to 6 months, child will start sitting, and 7 months, child will have this stranger's anxiety. So and after that, around 1 year, he should start walking or standing without support, and he is able to recognize his parents, and he used to say mama, the 1 2 words. Can non-verbal communication. He can point to the objects and ask what he wants. Must be interested in the surroundings. If mother is doing something, he would like to imitate those things. He won't just do the other things, but he would like to, if mother is sweeping, he would like to sweep, or father is working or mother is working, he would like to imitate that kind of behavior. So he's observing and try to imitate these kind of behaviors. We take the history and we as well observe what way the child is currently. Is he lagging only in the speech domain and cognitive domain, or he is lagging in all the domains? When he is lagging all the domains, then screen time is unlikely to cause the delay in all the domains. So this is alarming. We have to evaluate in other lines. When this not just screen time, so only speech and cognitive regression is there, then first thing comes in mind is in the behavior perspective, autism. We'll like also in neurological aspect, we'll also assess like, is there any other symptomatology? Like there is a small head, any birth history, is there any insult in the birth? That if there is any insult in the birth, again, like a CP child, cerebral palsy we call, all the domains will get affected. Right. So in these lines we will work. And are there any comorbidities? Only delay is there, or there is associated epilepsy or seizures in him, or in the family, were there any family history of epilepsy, or any delays, any regressions? In that lines, we would like to take the detailed evaluation in all the domains, and then we'll work from there.
Okay. And so your take on this?
Yes, I just add on to what Madam is saying. I think it's a very important point she's saying. What we also need to understand, especially when Madam says certain conditions like autism.
Yeah.
Right? So, delay in general public, okay, or sort of an educated public people, when they say delay in a young child, especially speech and language delay, almost synonymous with autism. right? Neatly. So, one thing that being a child and adolescent mental health specialist, what I feel is there has to be a holistic approach in treating this child. Okay. So, autism, when we want to talk about it, it's a very big subject. But just to concise it into 2 or 3 or 4 paras, what I want to say is autism, though it is a neurodevelopmental condition, there is a neurological perspective to it. Okay. Many of the autistic children have comorbid seizures.
Okay.
So if the child has seizures, definitely take the neurologist. If the child has only autistic symptoms in the form of repetitive behaviors, okay, any stereotypes, or if the child has a speech and language pathology associated, take the psychiatrist. Okay. Now, not just the child psychiatrist and a neurologist, we also need to understand there are a lot of other aspects, because the brain is getting affected, there is so much of deficits in the child. The child can have sensory deficits. We have so many children, when they get happy, they flap their hands.
Yeah.
Right? We will have so many children that tiptoe. Right? So these are all sensory behaviors. We have so many children with autism, they get hurt, they're bleeding, they get burned, they don't tell their mommy, they don't cry because they don't have they are
Sensation.
hyporeactive to the pain. Okay, these all require occupational therapy help. Where the child is not speaking, or like Madam herself, where he has acquired bisyllables and then currently down to no speech. Get him evaluated properly and then take the help of a speech and language therapist. So a holistic treatment approach in these children along with pharmacological help wherever it is indicated.
Okay.
Wherever it is indicated. Now, I'm not saying in autism per se, a pharmacological help is always recommended. No, I'm not for it. Child is very young, has autistic symptoms, not required. You can go with early intervention services and all that. Okay. So where required, pharmacological help. If there is no other pathology where pharmacological help is required, more of speech and language and occupational therapy is required, we need to get it.
So coming to the autism itself, sometimes there will be autism is itself might not be the only condition existing in the child. Like that itself is not the primary this thing. There is another component which is manifesting like an autism. Autism is a part of it. Like how I say neurology works like a puzzle. Many neurometabolic conditions can present like or can present in an autistic child, which will be many times might not be picked up either by the parents or their primary pediatrician, or many times they can find out that there are pointers and they can refer to us. So that conditions like these things we call syndromic autism. So apart from normal non-syndromic and syndromic, they have subtle dysmorphic features. They will have some other failure to trial, some other metabolic issues going on, frequently falling ill, epilepsy, comorbidity, along with the autistic features, microcephaly, small head, or not developing in all the domains. Along with autistic, there is a delay also, there is autistic feature also, not just regression, autistic regression. So these things will alert the primary pediatrician or the psychiatrist, whoever is dealing with the child, and that points to a neurological evaluation in detail.
So, Dr. Purnima, I would like to ask you, does seizures and encephalitis leads to long-term behavioral and learning issues?
So a seizure is nothing but it is a electrical malfunction of the brain in a simple term. Which so your brain has lot of nerves, axons, neurons, all that we discuss. We know about. We all that must have studied in science. So each they communicate with each other through small microelectric activity. So this seizure happens when there is a misfiring or there is some voltage fluctuation in the brain. Why this happens? It can be some like structural effect, like it can be some kind of structural effect, or it can be some genetic issue coming, or some immunological issue coming, or there is a metabolic issue, there is some other metabolic issue going on in the body. this product go there and hinders that functioning. So that can also happen. What needs to be not there is there, or what needs to be there is not there. So any of that can cause this kind of seizures. So when the seizure happens, there are multiple reasons per seizure in the first place. So it can be due to infection also per se. That is one of the common etiology
Okay.
for seizures. So when the infection goes to brain directly, when the particular pathogen, be it the bacteria or virus or fungus, depending on the immunological status of the child, when that reaches the brain directly, it can insult, or indirectly that stimulates a immune response in your body. Means when there is a fever, your body fights the fever. When there is a bug entering into your body, foreign body, your body fights it through causing rising temperature, which we say it like a fever, and other white blood cells and all these things, whatever immunity our body develops and identifies it and attacks it, right? In the same way, this particular immunity again goes indirectly through the brain. This bug as such won't go. This immune cells will go and attack your own brain cells, thinking that there is a common object in both. Similarity will be there at some level. So they think that as a foreign object and attacks it. That is where there is an immune response in the brain itself. That can as well cause seizures. So that is termed as encephalitis. So it can be infectious also, and it can be immune triggered also. So now we are calling this as ITS. This is a new terminology, infection triggered epilepsy syndromes they are called. So there's an infection not per se, but they're triggered. Infection that triggers some response and they cause this kind of. So that community, what will it do? It will attack your own brain. Your brain again fights and becomes swollen, right? Brain is a closed component. So when that brain cell gets swollen or one compartment gets increased or there is a bleed in the brain, that compartment increases, then the normal brain will get shrunken, will get like pushed away. So sometimes this pressure effect will be shown in the form of posturing also, in many other like headache, rapid headaches, vomitings, or the altered sensorium. The child will not respond, become excessively drowsy, or he looks, he sees the things which are not there, the delusions, hallucinations, altered behavior. Such things can happen, or they can throw a seizure, any of this. So when this is a acute means they have to be addressed very, very early. Like 24 to 48 hours, they need to go to the medical attention very fast. For example, I'll tell you, there is a child which we have seen during my course. So that child is around 11 years of age. She is a girl. She is around 11 years of age. Father and mother are very well educated. So their only child after many years in their well settled families. The child was doing fine. One day she developed normal fever, cough, cold. Within 1 day, with not even 24 hours, a half day later, child started throwing severe headache and started vomiting profusely. Then the parent took her to some hospital where she was prescribed some medication. She was oriented, she was talking well and all this. So she was given some medications and again she was sent home. Within few hours, child couldn't tolerate the headaches and the doctor advised to do some blood tests as well and get her under admission. Okay. The father was saying, I remember seeing this was like when I joined my course. This was the first case that struck me. So I remember we have seen that child in ICU. How that child came to us, the father was saying, in the different hospital where the child got admitted, that girl was little reluctant to get the blood test and she was throwing like, bye daddy, bye, I need to, let's go home, I'm fine. But she was not physically well. So he wanted to keep her under admission. Suddenly she started seizing. And after that, she lost her sensorium. Like she became unconscious and she is not responding at all. That is when they shifted. This is all happened within 24 hours. And she was shifted to us when we go. We have seen the child. She was already in the brain herniation, we say. That herniation symptoms have set in actually. So, and she was unstable. Her blood pressure is low. She was in shock. And that whole symptomatology progressed a lot, very rapidly. So she is not physically seizing when we have seen her, but when we connect to the EEG, there is continuous seizure going on in the brain, and there is a lot of pressure effect. That point we have to relieve the pressure. But before shifting her to any procedure, not even for the scamming, physical symptoms looks like raised ICT, right? Raised intracranial pressure. but we couldn't even do the scanning. Before that, only child collapsed. And we couldn't like father, we everyone were so clueless. These are called hyperacute conditions. Very little early, if the child had come, little very rapid edema measures we have taken. Sometimes we can save the child also. Many times. So, skin may rare, but very serious and important conditions. Right time, right treatment matters. So that is the reason whenever parent is feeling any kind of like I don't think this is normal. I think we need to see a doctor. Whenever you have that intuition, go talk to the doctor. Go talk to the specialist. Never ignore any symptom. Talk to the expert. Don't Google anything. Go talk to the expert. Even you Google, go talk to your doctor. Then for they know how to. There is a lot of information online. So we as an expert, we know how to process the information properly and how to guide the parent. So you go with your information, do your research, go, but talk to the doctor, then they can guide you through the right way. What to believe, what not to believe, what is evident, what is available for you, what you can do.
So seizures are more common like nowadays also and before as well. But now people are, I think, they know more about it. So if a child is having seizure, for example, let's say there is no medical service at home, at school, or even if he's playing with his friends. So at that time, what should they do? What is your advice to the parents or the friends or normally to the people?
So when when a child is prone to have a seizure, so certain things are important for the parents or the teachers to understand. We teacher also, like in a school, there are so many kids. So few of them might have a seizure predisposition to a seizure. So it can happen to anybody anytime. So they should know what is the first aid thing they have to do, or in a public setting, or in at home also. Parent usually get panicked, right? So when we know this child is going to have, when we diagnose a child with epilepsy, we will tell them with a set of instructions for the child what to do. When this happens, don't panic. So when the child is seizing, don't panic. First thing, keep the child into a left lateral position. Roll the child towards its left side. So the common misconceptions in treating in the acute care like this is when the child is actively seizing in front of you, you are in a bus stand and there are so many people surrounding
Yeah.
that baby, that patient. So common thing people do is they tend to, somebody says put some iron rod in the hand that can stop the seizure. Somebody says put an onion in the mouth. Somebody says put something in the
Spoon or something. Yeah.
something in the mouth, or else he'll bite his tongue and he'll get himself injured. The most dangerous thing is not biting the tongue. Biting the tongue, we can deal with it. But the thing is, you put something and it will go and obstruct the airway. That is the most dangerous thing. It will again stop the breathing. It will again affect your brain. It will cause more neurological and also the physical damage to the child. So the best thing to do is keep the child in left lateral position and don't put anything in the hand, mouth, nothing, no foreign object at all. That iron rod won't help at all. Most of the time, like 80%, studies say 80% of the seizures, 80 to 85, they will stop on their own. You just have to support. Hey, when you don't have anything. So you have to like be this position. Then if available, we have already given you a spray. You know that child is prone to. Don't panic, use that spray. Well, after 2 to 5 minutes, the child is still seizing, then use the spray. You don't have anything, keep it in this is, we call it as a recovery position. You put the child in that position, then call whatever the emergency you can. So after seizure, child will be little drowsy. That is a normal thing to happen because child brain has overfunctioned. So it is resting now. So brain is resting, body won't work. So it will be in that misfunction, malfunction, say recovery phase. So give him some time. Meanwhile, take him to the hospital and let the doctors take over. Like why this happened, what was the reason, is it predisposed to seizures, that and all. So what I would like to tell is no iron in the hand or nothing in the mouth, just recovery position. Make sure the child is into the left lateral position. That's all.
I think important thing to add, Bobby, to what Madam said was very commonly people do the mistake of giving water to an actively seizing child. Give him water, give him. The child in the seizure or the post seizure, there is no condition to swallow the water actually. Most of the times what happens is the water invariably goes into the airway and then into us. Correct. And then they develop a secondary infection. Or, it might result in much more severe detrimental consequences as well. So I think that is one more important thing that we definitely need to tell, feed the parents. You don't feed the child. Let him completely recover. There is also a post-ictal phase where the child is very drowsy and all that. So when they are drowsy, just let him sleep, let him recover and all that. And then probably give him water or whatever you want to give that later on.
So we were talking about the seizures. So in your practice, how many severe cases you have watched till now? What was your worst experience till now?
Yeah, so during my training period, we have seen most complicated cases. So this is one of the rare kind of seizure. Epileptic condition I'm trying to tell now. So it is called fires. So this is a febrile infection related epilepsy syndrome. So it is a devastating. It is termed itself as a devastating epilepsy. So what happens in this is it can happen in any school going age group children, completely normal child, normal development. Then suddenly he might have a fever, normal fever only again. So this is again kind of an inflammatory condition which we have previously discussed, one of the kind. In that there are multiple conditions with that pathology. This is one of it. So this is a serious issue in the sense that child will be normal, going to school, then he develops fever, cough, cold, whatever the trigger is, any viral trigger. Then there is a fever. He is the patient I'm addressing is around 8 to 9 years of age. So he was doing very well in studies. Then he presented with multiple episodes of seizures in one day. There were three, four, five episodes. Then his sensorium slowly goes down. Then he developed some more episodes. When he presented to us, he had this no activity at all. So there were continuous seizures going in the brain. We call it like a status. When there is a seizure lasting more than 5 minutes, clinically, like convulsive, like child is seizing in front of you more than 5 minutes continuously, it is a status epilepticus. So they have the timeline. So when to control? If you're not controlling, then it will be like a fire. It will be like this whatever mechanism is going on causing the seizure will trigger the other mechanisms as well. They will catch it. They will trigger other things. They will catch it, and whole cycle will become very vicious. So we have to, like how we put water on a fire. So we have to put some medications. All the there are few medication. There were set of guidelines by ILE. Multiple bodies have now started to create these guidelines for how to manage such, because they're extremely rare. 1 in 1 lakh or 1 in 1 million cases we will see. So we have seen two of such cases. So very meticulously managed. They will have seizures for around 1 month also. They need that ICU care for 1 month. And we have to continuously monitor their EEG round the clock. Is he having seizure? Because clinically he might not, but electrographically in the EEG he is seizing. That's why sensorium is not improved. So he need multiple infusions, multiple drugs at the right time. Then that child, after 1 month, we could able to extubate and shift the child to ward, and then after that, that child was discharged with a sequelae. Kind of, he was not completely oriented. He was not walking on its own. So slowly he started developing walking on the follow up visits. With some medications only, we will send him all the epileptic medications. But he come back. He came back to us after some monthly follow up we do. So 5 6 months later, we have seen him coming back walking. Then he starts going to school. Now he even passed his exams also. He is doing cognitively also good because it was right time, right management. On medication, he needs that epilepsy treatment because later on it can be like any time that child can have a seizure, epileptic. So we'll keep him on those drugs. But it is like a very nicely managed two cases, very rare cases, very nicely managed cases by our team where I worked with.
You are working in Maharashtra as of now, you are doing your fellowship there. Last year, we have heard the cases of GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome. And the severity of cases was that much that news channel was covering. So, how you dealt with, and according to you, how we can prevent it?
So Guillain-Barré syndrome is a ascending paralysis. It is a like acute onset of paralysis. Like both lower limbs stop working. Like child difficulty to walk, difficulty to bear weight, or very severe pains in the legs, and he is not able to take any step forward. Not because of the pain per se. There is no, the parents tell us that there is thakat hi nahi hai. There is no strength in the limbs only. He is not able to stand. Even we make him to stand also, he can't. Then within few hours or a day, sometimes the course itself is like that. It starts from the lower limb, then upper limbs might get affected, then all the respiratory muscles can get affected, then swallowing difficulty, all this can happen. So when there is a chance of respiratory paralysis, there is a chance of not able to take the breath. So that child will go into that arrest because he can't oxygenate his body, right? So that is when the acute management comes in. It is an acute condition which has a very good treatment. 90% of the cases will come out fine if they were treated the right way in the right setup. So the management is mainly focusing on, it is an immune reaction in the body happening. So the immune suppression is the management. Right way, it's available in some government hospitals also. Government will provide free of cost also in some setups, IVIG. So based on the body weight we'll give, there are few not responding cases also who needs aggressive management, but many cases respond well. So in children, so 80% to 90% of the cases will recover. But that also has a phase. It will have an acute phase and then they reach a plateau within 4 weeks. Within 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, symptomatology becomes static. Then after some time, that symptomatology will slowly get improving. Go into that improving phase after that plateau phase. Natural course also. We have to intervene because to decrease the severity. Or if it goes into respiratory paralysis stage, we have to intervene early because to stop further. So that is where, or else sometimes very mild weakness which is gone unnoticed also, child will start improving immediately. These kind of situations were also there. So you are right, there were definitely rise in cases in Maharashtra a few months ago. So many GBS cases, so many acute facet paralysis we called AFP was there, which were even notified also. That time we have notified all the cases because AFP is a notifiable condition. Yeah.
So now let's talk about the stroke. We are listening so much in the adults nowadays. It really happens in the children. And if it is happening, then what are the major signs and symptoms which parents should notice?
Yeah. So stroke is not an adult condition. Actually, it happens in children as well as in infants also. There is a condition called perinatal stroke, that is, which is like it can be before birth, like in the intrauterine phase also. Like after 28 weeks of gestation, anytime between 28 weeks to 7 days after birth, that period also child can have some kind of stroke-like event which has happened in the brain, which has caused some kind of manifestation in the kid. How they will know? After birth, parents will notice that child is able to move all the limbs, but he is not moving one limb or one side of the body. That is how they will, if they address it keenly, they will know. But many of the times, these kids will come to us later in life in a way that child has difficulty in walking. So child has sat, but he is not walking, or he is dragging his one side, or one side is smaller than the other side. His speech is delayed. When we go to the neuroimaging and see there was a stroke happened at perinatal age. So why that happens? It can be of multiple reasons. Mainly, it can be few intrauterine infections. They were notorious to cause this kind of stroke, or it can be some kind of PIH. Mother has some BP, some predisposition which might had caused some clot which had caused this kind of event. So, and idiopathic also, there are few conditions which were yet to know, but this is a very much possibility that the later on they present like a delay. But what happened is the perinatal insult which was a stroke. that again they present like hemiplegic cerebral palsy, that term we use. Childhood also they have the stroke like event. The child was active, walking, talking normally, then suddenly he developed one-sided weakness or he developed facial drooping. So how there is a simple mnemonic that we use, face, which is like facial drooping, then arm not able to live, drift, arm drifting they will have, then there is slurring of speech, that it will have that. Timely management is important in that situations. Right time have to visit the doctor, right time, that again they have a golden hour. During that time we will do the neuroimaging, we'll see is there a brain insult happening. If it is happening, is it in the arterial phase or in the venous phase? We'll do further imaging of his venography, arteriogram, find out the pathology. Then we'll understand with the blood work what exactly is wrong, why this clot is happening, or what exactly, is it a bleed or is it a clot, and based on that rightly manage. So the power can mostly improve. So we can, if you treat it early, they don't progress. We can cut it down there, and we can slowly even decrease the insult later on.
So nowadays, like we are hearing so much about the ADHD and autism cases. So is that really true, or we are just diagnosing more? And also there is a lot of debate on the medications like leucovorin.
I'll take the first part of the question. I think ADHD and autism spectrum disorders, they have been there for as long as humans are there. It's just that we didn't know they existed. Okay. So the first part of the question, is it being, is the prevalence increasing? Is the incidence increasing? So I think what I look at it in two perspectives. The first perspective being, I think there is an increased awareness of both these conditions among the parents. Okay. Parents know that if a 2-year-old child today has not developed speech by the age of 2 years, or is having some unusual play types, or if there is less interaction, this can be autism. Okay. A parent knows that if one child has autism, there is a certain risk that the second child also will have autism. So they are more aware. Okay. So more and more cases are being brought to the clinics nowadays by the parents. Okay. So just with the suspicion of autism. So a high reporting of the cases also leads to high intake of the cases into the clinic, also leads to high reporting also. Second most important thing, this is a clinician thing. Okay. So the parents are bringing the clients. So the clinician also diagnoses these cases according to certain criteria that we follow. This is the DSM or the ICD-11 criteria that we call it. What has happened over the last 2 decades is the criteria have become more relaxed. Before they were very stringent, this is absolute cutoffs. Okay, now it has become more relaxed. So this also has what it has resulted is more people are falling under the umbrella of this particular criteria. So naturally there is more children that are being reported as having autism, because the criteria have become far more wider in the sense. So what I would want to say is it a good thing or is it a bad? I would want to say that it is a good thing in the sense that more children, because they fall under the criteria, or because of the more awareness of the parents, the children are being brought to the clinics at a very young age. Now we all know the golden period of brain development, 3 years, no, less than 3 years, 3 to 5 years, whatever it is. So when you start intervention services at a very young age, when you take professional help at a very young age, when you institute speech therapy, when you institute occupational therapy, when you institute behavioral therapy at a very young age, more chances of development, right? Second thing, even if the parents don't want a formal diagnosis of autism, it's fine. If you don't want to label the child as having autism, perfectly fine. There's no problem. But you have brought the child to the clinic because the child has certain defects.
right? You felt that there is something abnormal with my child. That is why you have brought him to us. Okay. So now, because of the criteria, I'm in a position to say, okay, this child might have a mild features of autism. So let's do this therapy for the child's benefit. So this has resulted in not only an us in seeing increased number of cases, this has also resulted in the children receiving increased number of treatments and services. So it's a good thing.
So I would like to know more about these medications and what is your thought on this?
So there are few autistic conditions like cerebral folate deficiency, or there is some creatine transporter defects. Such conditions are some kind of metabolic conditions also, which we, as I have earlier said, they can mimic like autism. So in those conditions, they also will have, some of them can also have a seizure, late onset autistic features. So these were the clues. So in that time, when we give the right treatment like folic acid, creatine, or this what we are talking about, folinic acid, leucovorin is the name. So such drugs will do a tremendous job, that they will help to reverse or the stagnation whatever happened. The child will start progressing in the life, start progressing in the milestones, stop his seizures, his behavior improves even with pyridoxine. So that is the reason we need to suspect this you know there is just simply hiccups in a newborn might not always be simple hiccups. Normal benign hiccups are there because of the immaturity of the nervous system and that nerve supply, diaphragmatic supply. Still, in conditions like MSUD, they have this continuous hiccups is as a seizure, as a part of an epilepsy, and their irritability, crying, all this. So there's a very subtle which can be identified at a younger age, can help to whatever the extent we can decrease the load burden on the family and also the parents. And coming back to autism, in the same way, this kind of drugs which were newer and few dietary changes also can do a long in a long run can help the child to reach his maximum potential.
So, the last one, what is the biggest myth you both want to burst in front of the parents and society?
I think the biggest myth I want to burst is there are two things. First thing is psychiatric medication or psychotropics that we call in general terms are harmful for children. This is an absolute myth that I want to burst. I think for a long time, psychiatric medications have been villainized. In fact, they help in such a way that improves the child's development trajectory. The the graph goes up when we institute treatment. It really helps the child. Just giving a small example, you imagine a 5-year-old child unable to concentrate on academics, very hyperactive. You give him a small tablet and the hyperactivity completely reduces, and the child is able to sit in one place, read his books, perform well in the academics. How much of difference? A child expressing suicidal ideation. You give him one small medication, the depression completely subsides, and the child is able to go back to his normal life. What what change it makes? A child having psychosis, you give him one small tablet, the psychosis completely subsides, the child's life absolutely becomes normal. Imagine the consequences if the child with the depression having suicidal ideas doesn't get treatment. What we have seen n number of cases where the child harms himself, cuts himself, or jumps under something, or something happens to the child, something bad happens. We see n number of cases. No, psychiatric medication, they are popular to the contrary to the popular idea in the public that they are harmful. They are actually very helpful. Okay. Second thing, if a child has psychiatric problem in a very young age, for lifelong he'll have a problem. This is another myth I want to bust. No, it doesn't happen like that. There are certain chronic conditions that also do well with medication. But most of the conditions that we talked about today absolutely respond very well to medication. So that those are the myths that I want to break.
So, in neurology, what I would like to break today is every seizure is not an epilepsy. Many seizures are self-limiting, means by the age, with the age, they will be going down. So, child will grow out of it. And every epilepsy is not a devastating condition. Like any child with epilepsy is labeled as a not a normal child. He is like a mentally retarded child. So let's not address that way, because epileptic patients, as I have already mentioned, they can do very wonderful in life. It is just a condition like any other condition, and it has its own treatment, and the treatment won't be lifelong also. Based on the condition, the treatment will be for certain time and they can come out of the condition. Second thing, as we have discussed, don't put any iron in the child's hand or put any onion or anything in the mouth. So that won't help the child when the child is actively seizing.
So thank you so much, Dr. Ajay and Dr. Purnima.
Thank you for your entire team for having us. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Thank you.